Hey kids, how's it going? It's Mr. Hession. Hope you're staying happy, healthy, and safe. So we're starting to wrap up the 1920s, our work from this important decade in American history. Just want to go over a few points. What I want you to do today is, after watching this video that I post, I want you to ask any questions you may have in the stream. You don't have any questions? Awesome, good job. So just drop a line and say hello. So with the 1920s, one of the things that I want to make sure I hammer home is that during the 1920s, America kind of like goes into a little shell. We think of America as being constantly involved in world politics. But in the 1920s, we kind of took a step back. And a lot of Americans were very comfortable with that, considering we just got out of World War One. I think World War One, unfortunately, gets pushed to the side a lot with World War Two. It was a very dramatic and traumatic event in U.S. history. When a lot of soldiers who did engage in war came home, they were missing arms, legs, suffering from PTSD, and Americans saw that. And we saw that we were involved in a foreign war, that not one bullet flew across our territory. And we just see like constant change over in Europe. And it's like, why is that our problem? And presidents during the 1920s reflect that we kind of look at towards isolationism as part of our foreign policy. And it's not exactly what George Washington was preaching. He wanted us to be somewhat involved in world politics in terms of like trade and growing the American brand, but not getting involved in any foreign wars. But Americans felt at the time that all Europe does was go to war. And a lot of the Americans wanted to stay isolated. And we also see that in our immigration policies of the time, where a lot of quotas, limitations on immigration, were placed by Congress. So American economy starts off slow in the 1920s, but then really picks up. A lot of it had to do with easing of restrictions with the federal government on business. And that's going to hurt the American economy at the end of the decade. When we talk about the Great Depression and the stock market crash in 1929, that kind of ruins the 1920s party. The overextension of credit. So the concept of an everyday person gaining credit was mind blowing in many aspects, and it changes society. And like we see how credit works in today's modern American economy, and your parents had credit cards, your grandparents had credit cards, and obviously in a few short years, if not sooner, you will be having your own credit cards. And it's basically very small loans to enable you to purchase materials now, and you'll pay it off later. So a lot of Americans just saw this as free money. Okay, yeah, I'll pay it back. But what a lot of Americans do, and Americans still today do, they overextend themselves. And even though we were seeing a boom in terms of commercial products coming into the home, such as a vacuum cleaner, a washer and dryer. Well, I'll take away the dryer, a washing machine, like those things, that chores that took up all day, everybody's time cleaning the home. Well, now it was just done by a machine, and Americans have more leisure time. That's where we see more Americans going to college football games, baseball games, radios being placed in every single household, communication going across the country. So we see America get smaller. We see America become more modern. We also see running water coming to a majority of American homes. We see electricity being installed in a majority of American homes. It's very similar to when you were being born. Not every single person had Wi-Fi or internet capabilities in their house. It was just starting to. And I believe now, I saw the statistic of like 78 to 80% of Americans have Wi-Fi capabilities in their homes. So that was very similar to the 1920s when it came to electricity, and which is also why I see Wi-Fi one day being declared an essential utility. Just saying, it's the future. So we saw of the car takeoff. We looked at the culture. Couple things. Again, there was a very big distrust of foreigners, and we saw that with the Red Scare, fear of communism coming over and taking over the United States. The trial of Sacco and Vanzetti. They were two Italian immigrants who were arrested for murder, and they were found guilty. But all the newspaper headlines everywhere pretty much had them guilty even before the trial, just because their last names ended in a vowel. Again, there was a lot of distrust with particularly Italian immigration, and where is it? Red Scare, nativism. So, Red Scare, communism, immigration quotas, prohibition. Oh, big thing also, the Scopes trial. I would have spent a day on this if we were still in school. So the Scopes trial was the clash between religion and science. What does that mean? So the concept of evolution, you probably learned that, I hope you learned that, in your living environment class. So the concept of evolution was really becoming more widely acceptable, but in certain parts of the country where God created the heavens and the earth, they stuck to the Bible. That caused a lot of tension, and a Tennessee teacher was jailed and thrown, lost his job because he taught evolution. That man came from a monkey. So we see this with the Scopes trial, how like old values and old ways of doing things are clashing with newer ideas and new ways to look at things. And well, we see the 1920s, between the flappers and the fashion, the Harlem Renaissance. A lot of good comes from the 1920s, and trying to see that modern day America is emerging. And it's important to understand that we take a lot of lessons from the 1920s and apply it throughout the rest of the century, even today, particularly when it comes to credit. Government action or inaction on the economy. I mean, we're going to see more of that in the 1930s, but when the stock market crashes, the federal government did next to nothing in the grand scheme of things. They didn't know that the Great Depression was going to hit. So in their defense, we have history to tell us that they didn't know. So we see the emergence of science, we see the emergence of modern technology. In the 1920s, we see social revolution, we see the leisure time exploding. So the 1920s, very pivotal time in American history. Again, if you have any questions, please post them in the stream below, and I'll talk to you soon.